AI Mentors is brought to you by Alldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Our podcast, AI Mentors, brings you the leading minds in AI, sharing their story, their success, and their advice. Focusing on fast-tracking you to the top, AI Mentors cuts through the hype to help you kickstart your data science career.
Hello and welcome to the show. I am your host, Mike Froggatt, and on today's episode, we're joined by Theodore Tanner, CTO and Chief Architect at IBM Watson Health. Today, we'll dive into your journey in the industry, what attracted you to your current role, and what the future holds. So firstly, welcome.
Yes, thank you, Mike. Super excited to be here.
First of all, for the sake of the listeners, could you please just introduce yourself and run us through your story?
Sure. It's an interesting circuitous route, if you will. In a land far away, I was supposedly going to be a professional baseball player, and I had an injury, and I had to figure out really quick what I was going to do with the rest of my life. And I've always been interested in technology, and particularly I've always been interested in information science and mathematics. I started getting into the science of music, the perception of music, and I wanted to be a recording engineer. I went to vocational school, Full Sail, which many people have heard about, and I became a recording engineer. The more that I got into the aspects of recording and twiddling the knobs and so forth, I wanted to understand the interaction between the science and perception of media and what the mathematics hid behind the knobs. And so I went to a school called DeVry Institute and got my BSWET, and I did several amazing projects there. I got into compiler theory, I got into fiber optics, and this was the mid 80s. And then I went to work for GE Medical Systems in the mid 80s in the magnetic resonance imaging department, which is essentially a big superconducting radio transceiver. And that got me interested in superconductivity, more signal processing, more information theory, physics. I went really deep on the technology behind the systems, and then went to graduate school at University of Miami in the area of signal processing and perceptual media physics. And I got into the first designs of MP3. I got into something called acoustical imaging and reverb design, and I wanted to go work for a company called DigiDesign, which revolutionized the music industry, and I helped work on the original versions of something called Pro Tools, if any of your listeners are musicians or recording engineers. That in of itself was phenomenal. I have great contacts, great friends, great colleagues in that area. And then I went on to work with a company called Crystal River Engineering that was doing three-dimensional audio for then Jaron Lanier's lab, who coined the term virtual reality. So this was the early 90s, and they were doing stereo optic vision, Mattel data gloves, full immersive experiences. And then as time went on, I got deeper and deeper into technology, and I subsequently ended up running I was a public CTO of a company that was doing consumer and professional electronics. And that was my first foray into running a public company and also signal processing and consumer electronics, which I already had a love of, and professional electronics. That tendered an offer from a company called Apple. And that's when Steve came back, and I ended up working on the CPU software and graphics and audio for OS X. And that was amazing. We worked on the original iMacs, was at the iMac launch, the Think Different launch, etc. Left there and went to a machine learning company working on media, and that was bought 6 months later by a company called Microsoft. Ended up staying there for like 7 years, working on all kinds of things, XP to Vista, the Media Center, Xbox, technical policy on the Hill, and IPv6, RFID, like tons and tons of technology. left there and started a machine learning and NLP service as a company in 2007 on AWS. And that was really before they even had something called auto failover. We sold that to a benefits processing company, and that was my foray into the health tech world, called Benefit Focus. I was the VP of R&D there, and a colleague who I'd met at Microsoft, we were talking about disaster response and disaster recovery earlier before we started the podcast. Lisa Mackey, I met her, and she founded the company Belief Networks with me. We sold it to, as I said, Benefit Focus. We started looking at the data, and we said, there's no Twilio or Stripe meets health. There's no third-party platform, and we knew the consumerization of health was going to happen. And we left and went and started a company called PocketDoc, which I believe, and I've been told this, it revolutionized the whole area of health IT. We were very successful with that. The company was around for a decade. We ended up having about 1,000 third-party applications on us, and we sold it to a company called Change Healthcare. I took a little break. I really was being very methodical about my next move, and I wanted to fundamentally make my mark, so to speak, in the annals of technology and history, and kind of tear the veil, as Steve used to say. And I wanted to make sure it was with the proper company. And I had a couple of offers, and while I wanted to get out of health tech, I realized that machine learning, that there was going to be some interaction points. I believe that the future is open source distributed AI everywhere. And as such, there's only a few companies at that level that can pull it off, if you will. And with the cross section of open source software, with the purchase of Red Hat and blockchain and quantum computing, my only logical choice was IBM. And they came to me with an amazing offer to be the global CTO and Chief Architect across all of Watson Health. And as such, I get to work on genomics, pharmacology, payer provider space, and mainly in the areas of AI, blockchain, and quantum computing. So, that to me is astounding. Every day that I come to work as an information theorist and scientist, I am completely humbled, and I really feel lucky and humbled. So that's the short story, Mike.
That's the wrap, right? No, thank you for that. It's really interesting to see how the career progressed, and starting some of your own businesses as well. What do you think was the big switch that caused you to go from an engineer to a founder of your own business?
Yeah, that's a great question. I had an interesting situation, and let me say first, my first order of business as now a I guess a technology executive, if we can use that terminology, is to amplify others' careers. So that's why I'm really excited about this podcast. And I'm always trying to give to the industry, because what you get back is tenfold. And making the switch, the aspects being, I went from an individual contributor to a global CTO overnight. And that was, I literally was overnighted into a position of running a publicly traded company. So I went from an individual contributor overnight to a CTO without me even knowing about it. And then as I started looking at the mechanics of venture capital, mergers and acquisitions, stock prices and such, I figured that you are never as in control of your destiny as running your own company. And a lot of people say, well, I can't really take that risk. Well, I figure if you drive a car, you take a huge risk anyway, right? So
We'll take the subway.
Yeah, or take the subway. And the interesting aspect here is there is something that I have a saying: once a co-founder, always a co-founder. If you're a true co-founder of a startup, you do everything from payroll to take out the garbage, to interview people, to deal with all these edge cases, in addition to trying to figure out the vision and actually how to implement something with such a constrained environment. And I think that founding, everybody should try it at least one time, because just going and doing it, there is nothing like going out and walking into a room and saying, hey, I have an idea. And I say execution is everything. That really is. People, ideas are cheap, but the way I look at it, there's 3 tenets to a startup: technology, timing, and talent. And all 3 of those work together to create a successful entity.
So the first company you co-founded was Belief Networks.
Yeah.
From what point did you decide, right, I've got an idea for a business, I'm going to go for it, to when you actually quit your previous role and then went for it?
Gosh, probably 3 months, no more than 3 months. We left, we both left Microsoft with good blessings. And I ran into an interesting personal situation, which kind of ushered that in and accelerated that process, which turned out to be a great, one door closes one and another one usually opens. And it's amazing how fast, and especially nowadays, the time to incubate an idea to getting product market fit to executing on a code base has been compressed substantially compared to, let's say 2007. Not now, everybody's got a API for that, as I call it. So, crank something up, test it with your prospective customer base and go for it.
So as far as learns, so things that went wrong and you got better at, from being the founder of your own company at PocketKit.
Yeah.
What did you take from that? How does that role compare to your current role of being chief architect and CTO at Watson Health?
It's the scale is different. I mean, we I think we have 430,000 people at IBM versus 75 on a good day at PocketDoc. And running, having previously worked with large organizations, I definitely knew what to expect. But the economies of scale, and you have to realize, like, when you're talking to the public, like we're talking now, you have to think about things that seem unconnected, if you will, and nonlinear, like how other currency markets are affected. Because my jurisdiction, if I can use that seems like a overladen word, but if I can use that, like, we are global. And so as such, we have to think in very nonlinear terms versus being so focused on one exact thing. And that's probably the biggest difference. I have a saying, it's done quick enough of it if it is done well, but at least you got to get it out there. But just the economies of scale is vastly different.
As far as going into the office every day, or maybe not every single day, but often, what's most exciting? What's going on at the moment at IBM Watson that really gets you going in the morning?
The thing that really amazes me and excites me is what's going to happen tomorrow, because from genomics to the CRISPR editing, the 51% of the genome has been edited now. They're editing out certain diseases. I read where glaucoma is being edited out, cerebral palsy, but matching the genome, taking the genome, sequence genome, and the derivatives, and taking deep learning, like for instance, a Python library called DeepChem, taking that and matching it with deep learning for molecular derivative drugs. Like some drugs we can't even imagine with the deep learning algorithms. They're so numerous and scalable in nature, and mapping that to the actual genome so you can have deep precision medicine. That's one thing. taking IoT devices within the hospital or within the home and allowing high scalable Bayesian analysis of signals to the person, like true deep precision medicine, converting the health industry is a legacy industry, if you will. Let me lay some statistics on you. So 35 to 45% of all health data is unencrypted. There's about 70,000 breaches a day. There were 15 billion faxes in 2015 in health. And that statistic, I mean, really think about that. 15 billion pieces of paper hitting the floor. And while that may seem like a negative, I look at it as all opportunity to create a frictionless, personalized environment, because the only thing, very interestingly enough, and this is what's kept me in the health industry, is health, by the very definition, involves the human, involves the wetware, if you will. And that is what really excites me. We can't unsert the human from the equation, because connecting the provider to the consumer is what healthcare is all about. And as we know, with the recent situation with COVID-19, it is highly networked.
Absolutely. Yeah, you stole my next question. My next question was why healthcare? Why take your time and spend your time with people-focused work?
Yep. And it definitely, and from an AI perspective, machines are great at optimization. Humans, wetware, are great at creativity. Most importantly, in healthcare, they are amazing at empathy. And I have 3 amazing children, and I continually am amazed. Even when they were 2 years old, I would sit there and look at what they would go do in a very open-ended problem of search. Let's say, a traveling salesperson's search problem, going to get a shoe and trying it on. If we can duplicate the creativity of a 2-year-old now, which I haven't seen, but if we do, I'll go home. So that's what I'm really excited about. And then as of late, I've been getting heavily involved with IBM Q and the Qiskit Python programming libraries for IBM Quantum, and it mirrors what life is about: probabilistic, high combinatoric programming models that lend itself to solving solutions that we seemingly would have never been solved before. And so that's the other piece, along with the fact that, like I said, I believe the future is open source, distributed AI everywhere. I had an epiphany a long time ago with that, having worked at the 2 operating system companies, that the future is open source and Linux was going to eat the world, so to speak. And so I'm really excited about the possibilities.
All right. So changing tact a little bit, amplifying others' careers. That's a statement that you made that really stuck with me. What would you recommend people do getting into this industry, maybe a year, 2 years into being an engineer of themselves? And what kind of tactics should they use to kind of push their careers forward?
That's a great question. Education, I'm going to give a shout out to a great book that recently saw a 2nd edition, Alvin Toffler's Future Shock. If you haven't read it, it was written in the 1970s, and it talked about how the more stuff that comes at us, the less time we perceive to have, and the more things we seem to not own. And it greatly is changing the concept of education as well. There was a follow-on called Aftershock that's also a great book, and they discuss the future of education. Well, I think that companies like Udemy and Coursera completely changed the way that we learn. We've moved way beyond 17th century rote memory skills, and just because you have a degree at a great university doesn't mean you're a great coder. I mean, if you look at computing, Bill Gates and Steve Jobs didn't have degrees. Mm-hmm. And so the first thing I would do is, and especially with the past 5 years of the adoption of Python for machine learning, go, even if you're new to the industry, learn the command line. Neil Stephenson wrote a manifesto in '99 called "In the Beginning Was the Command Line," and learn the command line. Learn Linux. Go get a class, Introduction to Machine Learning, Introduction to Python. They're like some of this stuff's completely free. Some of it's like $9. So go break something. As I say in software, most of the time everything's broken. You're just not breaking it enough. And people get software is an interesting thing. It's the execution of an idea in an ephemeral space. So we no longer think about things, we think about bits, right? And in the future, we think about qubits and tri-bits, if you will. And I think that for the practicing or soon to be practicing software engineer, she should go out and just try hello worlds with everything, because we're in an age, as I mentioned earlier, we're in an age there's an API for something out there. Being able to sign up for an API on a cloud compute thing is brain dead simple nowadays. And go get some compute resources and get a book, open it up, get a Udemy class, get a Coursera class, and start hacking stuff. Cool. And contribute, and try to contribute. Get on GitHub, get your GitHub. Mm-hmm. Let me get super tactical. LinkedIn profile, GitHub, Keybase, Twitter account, and just start making stuff. That makes sense. And it's we're in such a highly connected world now that go create stuff.
Cool. So the basics is put time into it, invest in yourself, whether it's a boot camp or a YouTube clip.
Absolutely, yeah. And cool. And don't be scared. I mean, somebody's going to laugh at you no matter what. Just care less. You can do something they can't probably. So don't worry about it.
Nice. Okay. So as far as this is a mentor focused podcast, is there anyone in particular that amplified your career or that you'd consider a mentor?
Oh my God, that's a whole other. That is a whole other section. I got a list actually. I want to. I've been pushed lately. Well, over the years, I've been pushed heavily to start writing a book, and I've started. And I started with the last page and the first page. I already wrote the last page, and I started with the first page, which was thank yous and acknowledgments. Let's see. Professor Ken Pullman at University of Miami. He always said, be more technical. Execution is everything. Rob Curry, who's now at Anthem AI, he was at the Genomics Institute. He hired me at DigiDesign. Greg Paley at Apple. Claude Lindquist at University of Miami. He had the coolest saying. He said, Theodore, you never solve problems. You just trade one set for another set of problems. But yeah, I have and just the people that I have worked for, who have supposedly worked for me. I call it working for them. They're too numerous to mention, because I'll give a shout out to Lisa Mackey. She's now the general manager of health alliances at Microsoft. She's done way too much in my career. But I have a whole laundry list of people that I give thanks to. But that's a short list, Mike.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, there's so many people that impact our whole life.
And you know what? Stay humble, man, because I think that's the first order of business, because you have and you know, the people, my heroes are Claude Shannon of the Shannon limit theory, John von Neumann, CPU architecture, game theory, John Nash, game theory, and Alan Turing. Those are the I call them the 4 horse people of the digital apocalypse.
It's all their fault.
Yeah, for better or for worse. So, but it's just think about it. If they were around today, I don't. Yeah. They would be amazed.
Yeah. Well, I am constantly amazed with how the world changes and how quickly we get used to the subtle changes in our lives. But look, I wanted to say thank you very much. I really appreciate your time coming on the show. I'd love to spend more time speaking to you about all kinds of topics, but for now, we really appreciate your time.
Awesome, y'all. Y'all have a great day and go make something. Thank you very much.
Get the Alldus advantage. Become a member of the Alldus community and enjoy some of the following: AI meetups. Once a month, our community gathers to listen to some of the leading experts in the world of data science and AI. Our speakers come from all over the world, including Dublin, Boston, and Frankfurt. We also have our AI mentors. Our experts will provide mentoring to Alldus members. And don't forget our AI in Action podcast. Each week we have guests from all over the world talking us through their education, career, and more. Become an Alldus member and get the Alldus advantage. For more information and to sign up for our newsletter, log on to www.alldus.com. That's www.alldus.com. Alldus International, empowering through AI.